Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. We are presented and brought to you by FanDuel. Appreciate you being here as we have another fantastic episode of the Big Ten Huddle to bring it to you here as we have some new stuff coming in for the Big Ten. We have some players that on a podcast that they should have or they would win a rematch game. Talk about that with Caleb Downs over there at Ohio State. Well, formerly at Ohio State. He's going to the NFL draft now. And then we've also got, you've heard of way too early top 25s. Well, I'm going to give you way too early TV predictions. I'm going to predict where Big Noon Kickoff is going to be each week of the season, as you can guess, predominantly in the Big Ten. And then we'll finish it off with our Thursday night recap of Big Ten basketball. Let you know what happened in the two games tonight with Illinois, Washington, and Penn State, Northwestern. Give my thoughts on those two games. If you would, please do like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. If you comment down below, at the end of the month, I will choose one person, only a few days left, I will choose one person to receive some free home field apparel, $100 or less. I will respond to your comment, let you know, and then all you got to do, email me. We'll get you all situated, and you can get your merch. If you do want to buy home field, even if you don't win, please use the affiliate link down below. Helps me out. And if you're already going to shop home field, it already helps you out. All right. Before we get started with the show, do want to bring up that we did get some lines, some odds in the Big Ten early on in the 2026 season. FanDuel came out with them, and FanDuel has two games. So the Wisconsin versus Notre Dame game, of course, that's a neutral site game there. That game, Notre Dame favored by 19.5 with the over-under set at 46.5. And then you have the Ohio State-Texas game, that game in week 2. Ohio State at Texas, over-under set at 46.5. Texas favored in this one by 2.5. Now, we're not going to do like full predictions and previews and everything like that. Just my vibe when I first see that coming out, I don't know. Maybe I am believing too much in Luke Fickell. You let me know in the comments if I am. Maybe I am, but I feel like this Notre Dame team, yeah, they got CJ Carr back. They have some other guys back as well, but I feel like in the transfer portal, they kind of went after some more potential than production in certain areas. You know, the defensive line, they did that a little bit. Wide receiver, they did that a little bit, which is fine. I'm not saying that means the players aren't going to be good, but might be a little bit rocky starting the season that way. Quincy Porter, not even sure how healthy he'll be at the beginning of the season. I'm sure he'll play, but who knows how much spring ball he's going to get, how much fall practice he's going to get in there. So curious about that. But I would lean for Wisconsin to cover. I'm not saying Wisconsin's going to win, but I would lean for Wisconsin to cover in that game. And then, you know me, listen, the SEC, get out of here. 2.5 favorites. I think this line, I think the Buckeyes got this game. They're at Texas. Maybe they don't win, but I do think it's going to be a very close game, and I think it's one that the Buckeyes will be able to take advantage of. I think Sark is one of the most overrated coaches in all of college football. Maybe Sark puts it, makes me put my foot in my mouth, but that's what I got to start. So, all right, let's get to this stuff with Caleb Downs on his podcast. So Caleb Downs on his podcast decided to talk about the Indiana game a little bit as they were interviewing Carnell Tate. And, he didn't necessarily bring it up and make it a segment or anything like that, but his brother, Josh Downs, who he does the podcast with, decided to ask Caleb, hey, do you think you would have beat Indiana if you played them again? I'm going to play the clip for you of the podcast, and then we'll talk about it.
Had another shot at Indiana, would y'all win?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe.
Why you put your hand up like that?
No, I'm just saying maybe.
Yes.
No, maybe. That's what I'm saying. Who knows, though?
So there you go. That was Josh Downs asking the question to Caleb Downs and Carnell Tate, saying, hey, if you played again, would you win? Now, obviously, Indiana and Ohio State, they played in the Big Ten championship game, 13-10. It was one of the closest games of the season for Indiana. Obviously, Indiana had the Iowa game, the Penn State game that were also very close. The Oregon game was probably closer. The first Oregon game was probably a little bit closer than maybe the score indicated there because Indiana did begin to pull away at the end there. But still, regardless, that was a 10-point game, double-digit win for Indiana and on the road. It's impressive. I'm obviously not taking anything away from Indiana. 16-0 national champions. You can't take anything away from them. So, but Josh Downs, he asked the questions. If y'all had another shot at Indiana, would y'all win? And I think it's important to recognize that this was not, like a prompted segment or anything like that. I do think that, Caleb Downs, he's still holding a little bit of his SEC in him a little bit with these hypothetical matchups and saying he's going to win. I'm kidding. Ohio State fans, chill out. All right. But I do think, like, what else is he supposed to say? Indiana fans, they found this on social media. And don't get me wrong, if I was an Indiana fan, I'd be right there, tweeting it back at him and saying, oh, yeah, if you had another hypothetical matchup, yada, yada, yada. I'd be right there with them as well. Of course, you know me, I'm an Ohio State fan. But at the end of the day, like, there is stuff that gets said that bothers me. But, like, Caden Curry after the Miami game saying, we would beat them 9 out of 10 times or whatever. It's like, okay, well, you didn't. So congratulations. You screwed that one up. Now, I think the difference between the Indiana game and the Miami game is, well, first off, I think, like, what is Caleb Downs and Carnell Tate supposed to say here? No? Like, if they say no, I think, Ohio State fans might burn down Columbus. I know these guys are up to the NFL at this point, but, like, you're a competitor. You're somebody that's obviously very much so believes in yourself, believes in your teammates. They're not going to say no. So that's first and foremost here. Number two, it would have been different if it was like bringing it up as a segment to talk about it or something like that. Oh, we would have beat this team if we played 9 out of 10 times. But, like, let's talk about it. But would the game look different a second time? We thought maybe it could with Oregon. It looked different, all right, different as in Indiana destroyed them. But, that was also a game where, Indiana got off to a hot start, the interception, and they got an interception in the other game as well. But they got off to a hot start, interception, scored right away. Oregon had some issues with running backs and stuff like that. So I don't think it's a like-for-like comparison. The game that honestly I look for more to say, would the Indiana and Ohio State game be different, is the Ohio State-Miami game. Because a lot of the same issues that you saw for Ohio State in that Indiana game were similar issues that you saw against Miami. And then obviously Indiana, they take care of business. They beat Miami. They win the national championship. And then that begs the question of, did Ohio State lose the game or did Indiana win the game? And it's important to recognize this question, because if you say Ohio State lost the game, then you're not giving enough credit to Indiana. And if you say that Indiana won the game, then you're making it sound like Ohio State, put on the best show that they could. And so it's probably a little bit of both. I lean more toward Indiana won the game, because I think in the clutch moments and the clutch plays, what they had to get is what they did get. But at the same time, you had some plays in that game like the Julian Sayin sneak, right? Julian Sayin, if he just snuck that ball and he would have stayed upright, he almost kind of fell down a little bit and wasn't able to convert the first down. If he stays upright and he gets that first down, is that a different game? Is it a different story? But then again, at the same time, some of the plays that Indiana made, if Indiana made that field goal, is it a different play? Is it a different game? Is it a different story? If Ohio State makes this, if that, at the end of the day, if Ohio State came out and beat Miami, I'd say that this game could have possibly been different if they played a second time. But fact is, Ohio State didn't come out and beat Miami. Miami was the better team that day. Miami was the better coach team that day. And against Indiana was the better team that day. Indiana was the better coach team that day. And I think overall in the season, from what we saw, Ohio State, they beat teams more soundly than Indiana did. But if we're being honest, that was not the schedule that we thought it was at the beginning of the season. And so Ohio State did not play some of the top tier caliber teams that Indiana played, like in Oregon, like in Iowa. Like, those are some of the top tier caliber teams that they played. I venture to say Iowa was better than Michigan last year, and that was one of the Ohio State's best wins. Texas was not a great team for Ohio State to play, and they played them at home. Indiana traveled to Iowa. So you look at the resume, you look at the way everything happened. Look, I don't like to say it. I'm an Ohio State fan. I'd love to say Ohio State would have beat Indiana. But if I'm looking at it being real, if I'm looking at it being objective, Indiana was the better team last year. So to me, that's, Caleb Downs and Carnell Tate can say, oh, yeah, we'd beat them all we want. But that's just more of them like being a competitor type of thing. At the end of the day, if they were to play each other at the end of the season for some reason after Ohio State lost to Miami, I'm not saying it would have been Oregon 2.0 or anything like that, where, Indiana just blows them out. But I would put my money on Indiana to win that game. Heck, I put my, I put it on Indiana to win that game the first time because I thought they were the better team and I picked them to win. So overall, like, if you're an Ohio State fan, it sucks. Obviously, you'd like to win that game. If you're an Indiana fan, you get all the you get all the time in the world to be able to glow. You can talk about it all you want. We won. We took you down. But at the end of the day, like I said, Caden Curry, his thing that he said, we would have beat Miami 9 times out of 10, stuff like that. I think that would have been different. And I also think that, for Ohio State fans, they need to understand that, like, it wasn't all the offensive line in that game. Some of that was Julian Sayin and him just being a young QB as well. He saw 7 guys in coverage, in zone coverage sometimes back there. And so, yeah, it was on Ohio State's offensive line at times, but at other times it was also on Julian Sayin not being able to see the field. And quite frankly, maybe Ohio State's offensive line gets better, but they also had some injuries on the offensive line. So, anything can happen. I'm not saying that Indiana would have for sure won the game or anything like that, but based on the way we saw Indiana play in the playoffs, based on the experience that they had, based on everything that we saw the entire season, I don't think you could say as an Ohio State fan that you would have beat Indiana if you rematched them. Maybe if you got to the national championship and we started, thinking about it a different way because Ohio State did this against Miami, Ohio State did this against Ole Miss, maybe they come in with more momentum. But at the end of the day, Ohio State has to figure out what was up with them at the end of the season. Now they hired Arthur Smith. He should be able to help the run game out a little bit more. But overall, you need better offense in that situation. Ohio State had a fantastic defense last year, but you also lose a lot of that talent this coming year. So we'll see what Ohio State is. I don't agree with people saying Ohio State's the number 1 team in the country. I think they got to show it to me a little bit more. Honestly, like, my no doubt number 1 team in the country is Indiana, and I think I got them there until proven otherwise. So they've got a relatively easy schedule. Obviously, not playing any Power 4 teams to begin the season next year, but even if they struggle a little bit, I'm not going to hold it against them because, shouldn't have held them against them last year either. So until Indiana loses, until they give me a reason to doubt them, I'm not going to doubt them at this point. Indiana brings back a lot of teams, a lot of players that were starters last year on this next team. And I think they're going to have a great season next year. We'll see what Ohio State can do. We'll see what the coaching can do, because at times at the end of the season, coaching failed them. Yes, the players failed too, and the other team was good. We're not taking anything away from the other team in Miami and Indiana and beating them, but the coaching failed them at times. And Ryan Day was, quite frankly, outcoached in both that Indiana and that Miami game. Not saying fire Ryan Day or anything like that. I'm not saying that. He's got a national championship. Obviously, he's a great coach. I think he's top 2, top 3 in the country. But still, something they need to do better at, something they got to get better. So we'll see how it goes. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to predict the Big Noon Kickoff each week of college football season. Be right back. You've heard of way too early top 25s. What about a way too early Big Noon Kickoff prediction list? All right, we are going to predict where Big Noon Kickoff is going to be each week of the college football season. Got this idea over from Flyover Sports, their Substack over there. They cover some Big Ten stuff and things like that. A lot of written content over there. So we don't really have a relationship with them or anything, but it was a good idea. They had their way too early top 25 weekly wish list for the Big Ten's 3 major TV windows. So they actually went over there and predicted all of them. Here, we're just going to predict Big Noon Kickoff, because as much as fun as it would be to predict all of them, I'm not sure I could be totally accurate on those. I feel pretty confident in my accuracy on this one. So the way that you have to try and be accurate on this one is you have to kind of go through a little bit of the process of the annual draft that goes on. So the annual Big Ten TV draft, I guess you could call it, happens in late April, kind of early May every year after the Big Ten schedule is released. Could happen sooner this year. We'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, we won't really know about it until it actually goes on. So it's a virtual event, lasts about 8 hours long, and it's a lot like, the NFL draft. They have war rooms, they go through all this stuff, and what they do is they don't go through and draft games, they go through and draft weeks. And so they say, we have priority 1 on week 8, and you can go through and say, well, we draft priority 2 on week 8. Whatever you want to do, this is how they distribute it out, and the goal is to distribute the high profile games to maximum viewership. And so when it comes time to select your game, then you would obviously have your week. You say, well, we have priority one, about a week or two ahead of time. You say, this is the game that we have as our priority time in it. Really, the only time you don't get a week or two ahead of time is like week 1 through 3. You have to kind of lock that in before the season even starts. But like week 4 and stuff like that onward, you can kind of see, well, what's this team doing? How good are they? Because like last year, Penn State would have had a ton of big noon kickoffs if not for how they obviously went throughout the rest of the season. So Fox has the advantage in this. They have the top 3 overall picks. They have 5 of the first 11 picks in this one. So obviously they get a lot. And then CBS and NBC, they each get 3 of the top 11. They kind of alternate the higher slots as they continue to go. So the preparation, it's a lot like mock drafts. Imagine fantasy football draft, but only for TV networks. What they do is they go through, they analyze the marquee games on the schedule, where they're going to be, and obviously the weeks that have multiple marquee games on it work out. And Big Noon's not going to typically pick a week where the marquee game is at USC or anything like that. They're not going to ask for first priority that week because they're most likely not going to try to show that game on that time frame there. So overall, this 2023 media deal, it goes through 2029. This is how it's going to work the entire time. The expanded West Coast teams obviously made this a little bit different for Big Noon Kickoff and what they can do. But I'm going to go through and give you what I think the first 4 picks will be, and then we'll just go ahead and go down the list for the rest of them, because I think it's almost impossible to try and predict the rest of the draft outside of the first 4 picks for Big Noon Kickoff, because not only can they draft priority spots in each week, but there's also trades that happen as well. They can say, hey, we'll trade you this pick for, a pick later on, and you can get priority 2 this week that we just drafted, or something, something like that, or we can get priority 2 of this week that you just drafted, whatever goes on there to try and make it all work out. And again, it's kind of like mock draft of the first round. Like you can mock draft the first round and get pretty close of the NFL draft. Outside of that, you're not going to be very close. Like your best thing to do there is to be like, yeah, this guy's probably a second round pick, but I have no idea who we would go to, because you don't know what trades are going to happen. This is going to happen. It's all very interesting. So pick number 1, I think, for Fox for Big Noon Kickoff, obviously, is going to be Michigan, Ohio State. This is one of the most widely watched games, if not the most watched game every single season. It's the greatest rivalry in college football. I think it's the greatest rivalry in sport, but I know others would disagree. That's okay. But I think it's the greatest rivalry in all sport, at the very least in all of college football. I saw a list the other day that had Alabama, Auburn. Are people stupid? That is not anywhere near the rivalry. It doesn't have the history. It doesn't have the decision making. It doesn't have the implications that Ohio State and Michigan has had. It's like you have to be a real SEC shill to think that Alabama, Auburn is better than Ohio State, Michigan. Like, give me a break. Anyway, this one's going to be at Ohio State. I think Big Noon Kickoff is going to lock that in for sure. There's no way they don't pick week 13 priority 1 first and foremost. The next pick I think they'll take is week 7 priority 1, which is when you get Ohio State, Indiana. Now, this game and Ohio State, Michigan were the 2 most watched non-playoff games of 2025. There is a possibility that they might go with Penn State, like Michigan instead, or something like that. But overall, I don't think so. I think that this Ohio State, Indiana one is going to be it. That Penn State, Michigan game is there as well. So like if either Ohio State or Indiana's not playing all that well, but it's so early on in the season, I highly doubt either of these teams is going to have more than 2 losses at most. I can't even imagine either of them has 2 losses at that point. Ohio State does have a rough schedule, but I don't think they'll have 2 losses. And even if they do have 2 losses at that point, Ohio State fans are insane and they're going to watch like crazy. So that's almost a given as well. And I think the third pick, this is probably the one where you have the most kind of decision making, because you could pick probably, I would say, two or three different games here. I think they're going to go with week 2 and go with Oklahoma, Michigan. Now, week 10 would also be an interesting choice, because in that week you have Oregon, Ohio State. That game is at Ohio State this season. And then you also have Michigan State, Michigan that week. So week 10 is actually like a pretty nice week to have priority 1 over, because it's later on in the season. There's a couple different options that you can go for there, and a couple different options of what Big Noon Kickoff could go for. Michigan State and Michigan has been a night game the past few years, but that's nothing that they're like locked in on, and that's nothing the TV people seem to be locked in on. It just seemed to be the way that the drafting and the priority has worked out. Now, after that, that's where things get a little tricky because I think the next 3 games that would probably get taken after that are either week 8 of Indiana, Michigan, week 10 of Oregon, Ohio State, or week 7 of Penn State, Michigan. I think Oregon and Ohio State's probably going to get taken by CBS. I can't imagine they don't take that one. And if they don't take it, I'm almost certain that NBC would take that. And I think Ohio State would be glad to have a night game at that point. So I think that's probably going to be the one that CBS takes, week 10, Oregon, Ohio State. And then I think NBC is probably going to take week 7 with Penn State, Michigan to be able to have that be a night one. And then I think that they're going to be left with week 8, Indiana, Michigan. Now, maybe, NBC takes Indiana, Michigan instead, and they're set with week 7 of Penn State, Michigan. That could also happen too. But the next best game outside of those that you might have is probably week 9, Ohio State, USC, but that's going to be a CBS or an NBC game because it's at USC. Big Noon Kickoff's not going to take that one. They're not going to have a 9 a.m. kickoff over at USC. They'll do some different stuff like that, like in the Central Time Zone, but they're not going to do that to USC. All right, now from here, I'm just going to go week by week and kind of talk through the different options and who I think they'll take. Week 1, I think they're going to take Ball State, Ohio State. Ohio State is just a ratings king. They had 6 top 50 non-playoff games in 2025, like top 50 games that were not playoff games in 2025. That was the most in the Big Ten. The team that had the next most was Indiana with 3. So it's possible they take North Texas, Indiana in that situation, but I think here you're going to see Ball State, Ohio State. Week 2, we already talked about that one, Oklahoma, Michigan. Week 3, you got a few different options here of who they could take. You have USC, Rutgers, maybe take that one. Purdue, UCLA, I don't think so. Again, UCLA on the West Coast. That honestly might be more of a Big Ten network game or something like that. And then Ohio State, Kent State. I don't think if they're going to do week 1 Ohio State, they would go back to Ohio State again, especially when you have Virginia Tech, Maryland in week 3. I think that's the one they're going to go for. I think that their thought process of Virginia Tech might bring some more viewers with James Franklin, his first, big game of the year. I don't think it's actually a big game against Maryland there. Sorry, Maryland fans, but I do think it would be something that could be something they entertain a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. But I think week 3, Virginia Tech, Maryland is probably where they'll go. Week 4, I think it's going to be Illinois, Ohio State. That was a top 50 game last year. And even with Ohio State or with Illinois, maybe not being as good this year, they're most likely going to be 3-0 going into that game. And so, Illinois going up against Ohio State, Illinois is undefeated. I think you get some good stuff there. Week 5, I actually think this is where they go to the Big 12. They go Texas Tech, Colorado. Now, if you've watched Big Noon Kickoff, Joel Klatt, he likes to get himself to a Colorado game at least once a year. And Texas Tech going to Colorado. You look at the ones that are around this one, Indiana, Rutgers, Michigan, Minnesota. I don't think they'll get Ohio State, Iowa, unless they really prioritize that game, but I don't think they're going to prioritize that game over some other ones. And so I think this will be one where they decide to go to the Big 12 and do Texas Tech, Colorado, and kind of just maybe punt on week 5 and let NBC and CBS kind of have their picks in that one. Next week, week 6, USC, Penn State. That's likely going to be the whiteout, I think. Either that one or the Washington game, but I think the USC one's more likely. So I think in this one, you're going to see Indiana, Nebraska be where Big Noon Kickoff goes here. Nebraska, obviously, big brand, a lot of viewership. Indiana at this point, they would only have been on Big Noon Kickoff. They wouldn't have been on Big Noon Kickoff yet at this point. So I think week 6 there, unless they go with week 5, Indiana, Rutgers, but I don't think they'll do that. I think they'll go Indiana, Nebraska there. Week 7, we talked about. Week 8, we talked about. Week 7 was the third pick. Week 8, we think Indiana, Michigan is Ohio State, Indiana's week 7. Week 8, we think Indiana, Michigan, where they'll go. So we skip ahead to week 9. And week 9 has some interesting ones. This might be one where they go to the Big 12, but you also have Wisconsin, Iowa in week 9. You also have Minnesota, Indiana, and Washington and Nebraska. I think Wisconsin, Iowa is going to be the one here. You can't take Ohio State and Indiana every single time. You just can't, because they do have to have their obligations to Big Noon to Big Ten Network as well. They have to be on Big Ten Network at least twice throughout the season. And so if there was a week to not really look at it here for this one, probably thinking that you go Wisconsin, Iowa here, especially week 9 there. Ohio State on the bye, Indiana going up against Minnesota there at home. Maybe they'll go there, but I have a feeling this is the one where they go Wisconsin, Iowa in this situation. Week 10, you have Oregon, Ohio State in this one, but like I said, I think that's probably going to go to CBS, maybe NBC. But so I think big noon kickoff in this one. I actually think they're going to take the Michigan State game away from the night kick. And maybe NBC snags it. Maybe they've been really happy with it and they snag it. If they do, Washington, Penn State is probably where they go in this one. But I think that Michigan State and Michigan is probably where they're going to go here. Michigan is really good for ratings. Even on down years, they're really good for ratings for big noon kickoff. And I think they'll go there in that one. Week 11, USC, Indiana. I think that's going to be a big game. I think that's where they're going to go. I think that Fox will prioritize picking that one as well. You also have Northwestern, Ohio State. I don't think they'll go there. And then you have Michigan, Oregon. I think that's likely an NBC type of game to go out there in that one in week 11. And then finally, since week 13 is the Michigan, Ohio State game there. Because there's no week 14 this time because there's no double buys. Week 12, I think Indiana, Washington is going to be an NBC game. They could go Ohio State, Nebraska. And honestly, it probably just depend on the picking order of what they do. But if Fox prioritizes the weeks, I think they'll prioritize. I think they'll have to go with Oregon, Michigan State in this one. Now, maybe they don't. Maybe they get Ohio State, Nebraska, but my pick is going to be Oregon, Michigan State in this one. And then, of course, like I said, to end the season, Ohio State or Michigan at Ohio State to end the year. Let me know your thoughts. These are my thoughts on where the big noon kickoff could possibly go throughout the season. Just to give it to you one more time, and then we'll move on. After this, week 1, Ball State, Ohio State. Week 2, Oklahoma, Michigan. Week 3, Virginia Tech, Maryland. Week 4, Illinois, Ohio State. Week 5, Texas Tech, Colorado. Week 6, Indiana, Nebraska. Week 7, Ohio State, Indiana. Week 8, Indiana, Michigan. Week 9, Wisconsin, Iowa. Week 10, Michigan State, Michigan. Week 11, USC, Indiana. Week 12, Oregon, Michigan State, and week 13, Michigan, Ohio State. Let me know your thoughts down below. Would love to get your thoughts and what you think, where you think that the Big Ten will be at, where the Big Noon Kickoff will be at each and every week. Do you like these selections? Do you not? Let me know, and we'll be right back after this. Thursday night Big Ten basketball recap. We had 2 games on Thursday night. Illinois takes the game and wins over Washington 75-66 at home for the Illini. And then Northwestern blows out Penn State 94-73 for Penn State. We'll talk about that game here in a minute, but let's talk about this Illinois game first, as Illinois does pretty much what they're supposed to do in this one. It was a little bit of a clunky game, but Illinois, they get their 10th straight win. They're looking good at this point. They just come off that game after beating Purdue, and now they're getting ready to play Nebraska on Sunday. So you had a little bit of a little bit of trap game potential here. I was talking about it on the radio show with Spencer. I said, hey, this is a game where Illinois needs to make sure they give Washington their best shot, because Washington does have some good players on this team, and Washington will get you. Wesley Yates was back, and Steinbach is a good player as well. He actually was kind of flying around out there, was playing some good perimeter defense at times, for most of the game, not just at times. But this is a good Washington team that I think deserves probably some more credit than people are getting them. Are they going to make the tournament this season? Probably not. They are 11-10 on the season, 3-7. You'd have to see a really good end of the season for them. Illinois 18-3 on the year, 9-1. They're atop the Big Ten, tied with Nebraska and the 2 Michigan schools. Michigan and Michigan State is going to play Friday night, which, by the way, we're going to go live for that right after the game and recap that Michigan State game. So be here live on the Big Ten Huddle Friday night. I need to get back into doing some of these live shows with Big Ten basketball now, with football over and everything else. We'll get into some of these live shows a few times, kind of call it Big Ten After Dark. So we'll get into that. But we're going to have a good time talking about these basketball games, but specifically this basketball game here with Illinois. It's impressive that Illinois can play kind of as clunky, and I wouldn't say bad, but just kind of clunky and not as put together, not as crisp and still come away with a 9-point win over a middle of the pack Big Ten team. Again, this Washington team is 11-10. They found ways to lose this season. They're 7-3 on the year, but they're still a top 50 KenPom team. That's the thing. Like, they still have really good efficiency numbers. They're still able to score. They still play good defense at times. And honestly, in this game, one of the biggest issues for Washington was how many times Illinois was able to keep them shooting jump shots and shooting three-pointers, and Washington just wasn't able to make their three-pointers in this game. In fact, Washington shot 26% from three. They were 45% from the field, which was actually better than Illinois. But the big indicator in this game were the second chance points. Illinois, 24 second chance points. Washington, only 4. And it's not like Washington wasn't doing a good job of rebounding. Washington did get 11 offensive rebounds in this game to Illinois' 14 offensive rebounds, but Illinois just got the offensive rebounds and more possessions, I think you could say. And then also they were able to finish with those offensive rebounds more often as well. So, this is one of those games where if you're an Illinois fan, you don't love it. Like, you don't come away from this one and you're like, oh, great. But you are and it's not like, we survived or whatever. It wasn't like this was a super close game. Washington kind of continued to hang around, but the first half was clunky. The first half, you got to a slow start. Washington got out to a 7-0 lead. You missed 5 free throws in the first half. And Washington, they were in they had Illinois in the bonus about halfway through the first half. And so you kind of had everything going for you, but you just weren't really putting it all together. But Keaton Wagler does end up with a really good game, 22 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds. He's really starting to come into his own. And I do think that part of this is just getting used to Keaton Wagler being the main guy in the offense. When against Purdue, as much as he was excellent, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away. 46 points, you're not going to get a single complaint from me. That was a game where he kind of did it all himself. This game, you saw a whole lot more of him trying to play within the offense, get other guys involved, be the playmaker, but also be the distributor. And you saw a good distribution in this game, obviously 8 assists, but you're still seeing guys kind of get used to this, work together. Andre Slavkovic did not have a great day. Only 8 points for him in this game, but I also felt like he got down into the paint quite a bit and just wasn't getting the foul calls in this one. So I'm not low on Andre Slavkovic in this one. I'm not low on Big T, Tommy Avicic in this one either. I felt like Tommy just couldn't hit a shot. 1 of 8 from 3 in this one. And I wonder how much of that is maybe a little bit of just a lack of chemistry between Keaton and Tommy. Tommy, his pick and pop is so important there at the top of the key. And they were really getting into that a lot, but he just wasn't hitting it in this one. But he did a good job of still remaining, obviously engaged and everything else. He was able to get some rebounds in this one, 6 rebounds overall for Big T. And he was able to pass the ball as well. 3 assists. He had a really nice rebound into an assist to Andre Slavkovic under the basket. So was it the best performance in the world for Illinois? No. Did it give you a whole lot of concern? No. Do you walk away from this one and say Keaton Wagler's still really freaking good? Yes. I mean, that's kind of what you walk away with. And at the end of the day, that the name of the game was go in here, get the win like you're supposed to, and get ready for Nebraska. And that's exactly what Illinois did in this game. So props to Illinois. I think Washington's a better team than people are giving them credit for. I mean, in this game, they shot 45% from the field. They were 100% from the free throw line. They had the same number of rebounds as Illinois. Like, they didn't get out rebounded to a bad margin, but they still lost this game by 9 points. Again, just the lack of second chance points was really kind of the biggest thing. And 3-point shooting as well was kind of the biggest thing in this game. So, tough one for Washington. You would have liked to be more competitive in this one. And this team is likely not going anywhere with the NCAA tournament or anything like that. But this Illinois team is going places. And this Illinois team has a very real possibility of being able to win the Big Ten this season. That game against Nebraska is going to be no joke. That is one they definitely have to get, especially after dropping 1 to them earlier in the season. But Michigan State and Michigan are right up there as well. Michigan State, they don't look totally unbeatable. They struggled in their game against Rutgers. Just kind of like look at these teams as they're going into big matchups. Sometimes they kind of don't put it all together. Michigan State, they go into overtime against Rutgers. That wasn't a great performance, but they're still going to bounce back because they have Michigan coming up, and I think that's going to be a really good game. The other game that we had on Thursday night was the Penn State game. Penn State drops this one 73-94. Northwestern gets the win. Northwestern kind of goes crazy in this one, shooting over 60% from the field. They had a really, really good day shooting. In fact, they were able to, I think they were able to meet their 3-pointers per game mark, only about 13 minutes. I think in the first 13 and a half minutes, they were able to exceed their season 3 points per game average. Not a great turnout by the Northwestern fans, but at the same time, this Northwestern team, they're 10-11, they're 2-8 on the season conference. Nick Martinelli, he's really excited. He was the MVP in this game. He did really well scoring the ball, being able to put up, why can't I see these points? Being able to put up 34 points in this one, and you had 18 rebounds from Singleton in this one. Trey Singleton had 18 rebounds. Really, when you kind of put it all together, not great for Penn State. Like Northwestern, this is what they do. They can score, and you get Nick Martinelli really going. You can put up 34 points, especially when you see very little resistance from the defense. But I would be surprised if Penn State, you don't hear a whole lot of chatter about Mike Rhodes and where he's going and stuff. It was a really interesting decision for him to go into this season, year 3, with all these freshmen and everything. I never really loved the idea from the beginning for Mike Rhodes. Number one, you're going into a season with all freshmen against a much older, much more experienced Big Ten, where a lot of teams are really invested in the transfer portal and developing their players and playing older players, especially a team like Illinois, who's going out and getting guys from Europe who have played, as adults for a little while, not pro players. All right, we're not getting into that or anything. And then, Mike Rhodes has always been known for his defense, right? And you got freshmen playing out there. Don't get me wrong, good win for Northwestern. I'm not trying to take anything away from Northwestern by talking about bad defense by Penn State, but it's been perplexing this season to see Penn State kind of play this defense, and for Mike Rhodes to kind of try to operate with all these freshmen and everything. It is what it is. I'm not gonna say that Mike Rhodes is getting fired or anything like that, because we just don't know. I mean, there could be the possibility of them looking at this and saying, hey, he's got young freshmen, let's see what he can do with it. But at the same time, you got to show something at some point. You got to show a little bit of your identity as a coach. You got to show a little bit of your team and who they can be. And quite frankly, 9-12, 0-10 in the Big Ten, it's just not good enough. It's quite honestly terrible. I mean, this is a terrible Penn State basketball team, and Mike Rhodes is failing there at Penn State. We'll see, how much they care. Obviously, much more into wrestling than they are basketball over there at Penn State. But Northwestern, Chris Collins, and their whole situation there, they got a really good one. Nick Martinelli, unfortunately for him, just not going to really be able to have a super meaningful season this season. But 34 points, you know what? That's the bright spot to watch of Northwestern basketball, is seeing the interesting stuff there and seeing how that goes. So that is gonna do it here for us on the Big Ten Huddle in this episode. So let me know your thoughts, your comments, and everything below. 5-star rating review on a podcast, if you don't mind. If you do a 5-star rating and review, make sure you type something in there as well. So, JR is so smart. JR, you're the best looking podcaster I've ever seen, because I don't actually see my podcast. Do something like that, and you'll be entered in to win some home field apparel as well, and do all that. If we get enough 5-star ratings and reviews, I'll buy something for only the 5-star, reviewers. So, put those up a little bit and we'll see. But yeah, here at the end of January, I'll pick somebody, a commenter on YouTube or a 5-star rating and review person. Make sure you're like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Gonna make sure, even if you're listening on podcasts and you're not somebody who's only on YouTube, like, subscribe, so that way I can check and make sure you're there, and then I'll get a hold of you on the podcast. If I have to, I'll announce it and say, get in touch with me or whatever it might be. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time.